You're listening to the Forging Titans podcast with Dominic Hume.
Hey guys, welcome to episode number 8 of the Forging Titans podcast. We have a very special guest on the show, but before I bring him on the show, a few announcements. Forging Titans online coaching is up and running. Head to the Podcastily website, which will be shown in the show notes, to get your discount code and get 10% off all online personal training. Head to gripsling.com, key in the code Forging Titans, and get discounts of all GripSling products. Head to www.forgingtitans.com/join Team Titans. Sign up now and get my free ebook, which shows you how to get started on fitness, nutrition, and living a better life. So, guys, who I have on this show, he has been giving you the best sounds from my podcast, mastering my audio, and he is the editor of the Forging Titans podcast and the founder of his own company, Podcastily, which will be launching in 2 weeks. So, in the show notes later, you will get a coupon code for all of the Forging Titans podcast listeners, and you can head to his website, use the code, and get a discount. So we have Christopher on the show from Podcastily. Welcome.
Thanks, Dom. How's it going?
Yeah, it's good. I'm just sitting outside in sunny Singapore, recording this episode after 4 weeks of traveling. What about you?
Yeah, pretty good. Just sitting in my room in Perth, Australia.
This is a new experience for, the Forging Titans podcast and all of my listeners. So I think this episode will be rather interesting to bring to them.
Definitely.
Let's get started. Tell us a bit about yourself, how you got started with everything, what is your background, what you study, and how you got started with Podcastily.
Sure. So if we go way back, I was born in England. So I'm 20 now, about to turn 21. Raised there, middle-class family.
Yeah.
We weren't poor, we weren't rich. And then, when was it? So I think around about 2004. So I would have been about 10, maybe a bit older, maybe a bit younger. I'm bad at math. We moved over to Australia, and that's where I am now, living in Perth.
Yep.
And then 3 years ago, I moved up to the city of Perth, and I went to uni. So I studied a Bachelor of Audio. So doing what I love, being able to edit podcasts and everything to do with that. So like music, learn how to do that, working on films. Yep. And that, just sparked my love of podcasts. So for about a year, I started doing freelance work on podcasts, doing shows like Jake Sasseville's show, your show, Ari Meisel's podcast. And then had the bright idea of, no one else is doing it, so I may as well. And I started the company Podcastily.
Yeah, and you are doing a fantastic job, if I must add, with all of my podcasts. And I have seen your work and your cover arts for some other podcasts, and fantastic stuff. So good stuff.
Nice, thank you very much.
So great to have you on the show. Another young entrepreneur for everyone to watch out for, up and coming. Let's get into Podcastily and what made you want to start a business. So podcast is the technical side of things. Let's talk about the business of starting a business and what got you interested in becoming an entrepreneur.
Sure. So I guess being an entrepreneur is something which is just in you. It's a genetic thing. And I know Gary Vaynerchuk says a lot that you're definitely born with it, just like LeBron is born of being a very good sports star. It's definitely a genetic thing. So really, I've only noticed my entrepreneurial side of really the self-awareness side of it, of actually knowing that's what I am, has only kicked in probably the last 5 years.
Right.
Like coming out of school. I wasn't great at school. I used to say to my parents all the time that I only enjoyed one subject at school. That was aviation. That was what I was passionate about. That's where it sort of set in, because especially in the media industry, freelancing is becoming huge.
Yeah, definitely.
So I decided, look, I don't want to work for anybody in Perth. I don't want to work at a shop. That's not what I want to do. But I needed a bit of money, of course. So I started doing audio editing online using like Fiverr.com, freelancer.
Yeah.
Look, it was good. Like, bit of money here and there, but like you couldn't really put your name to anything. You didn't have like, and then like the tendencies started getting in. So I created like a website and started advertising on Facebook and Instagram. And found you through Instagram.
Yes, we did, yeah.
It worked out well for a little bit, I guess. And then I've always said I don't want to work for anybody. I get distracted when people ask me to do things that I don't want to do.
Yep.
So what's better than starting your own business and telling yourself what to do? No,
yeah, I agree. I think, all of us entrepreneurs, we have this need to be more kind of mindset. We want more, we need to be more. So we go out and we create stuff for ourselves. Do you have any tips which you can give to our listeners for the people who want to go out and create something for themselves? What's the first step they should take towards that ultimate goal?
Well, to be honest, it's simple. It's just doing it. A lot of people say ideas are easy, and I really believe in that. Anyone can think of an idea. Many people would have thought of the idea of Facebook. Many people would have thought of doing an Instagram, but it's actually doing it. That's the hard part.
Yes.
And
yes,
you're an entrepreneur. Like, you have got those genes inside of you when you get up every day and that's what you focus on. You don't do anything else. You just focus on that 24 hours a day.
Mm-hmm. You basically live your work.
Exactly.
I think getting up and just doing it is what people lack in, today's world. That's what separates the people who achieve success and the people who don't achieve success. It's just to get up and go and do it and be consistent no matter what, no matter how I feel, no matter if I'm tired, if I'm hungover from the night before. I think just staying focused and having the need to be more attitude, as I mentioned earlier, is what sets entrepreneurs and successful people apart from everyone else.
Yeah, sure. It's definitely the passion there. You've got to be passionate of what you're doing.
Yep.
And maybe the idea you came up with isn't a good idea. And you're going to have low points, you're going to have high points, and it might not work out the first time. But if you're a true entrepreneur and you really want to start a business, you're going to come up with it eventually. So you just got to keep forging away. Yeah,
definitely. I read a quote recently, and it says, "If you fail forwards." No, it's true. I mean, us being young, and I think most of my listeners are either young entrepreneurs or more experienced entrepreneurs. Every one of us make mistakes and have failures in our lives, but it's going into that situation and say, hey, what can I take away from that, and what can I learn from that, which makes us a better businessman, a better entrepreneur, better at our craft, better at whatever we do. And that also maintains this positive attitude towards life. And in the low points in our lives, we have to keep that mindset going.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a brilliant point. I mean, if you're not happy being an entrepreneur, running your own business, there's no point in doing it, is there?
Yep.
That's the main goal, is being happy in what you're doing.
And as I always tell my coaching clients, if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You got to hustle away.
Hustle away. So I think we should share with all of my listeners about what Podcastily and Forging Titans plan to do together in the future. I'm heading up to wherever Chris is in Perth very, very soon. The trip is in possibly June, the beginning of June. Looking at flights and tickets now. We are definitely going to be recording a lot more of these podcasts together when we're in the same room. And some content might be explicit, which will be quite fun. It brings, I think, my podcast, I want to go two ways with my podcast series. I want to go a structured learning course where you, my listeners, sit down and take out your notebook and say, all right, this week's action points, right? So I take away from this podcast 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then there's another sort of podcast where I have people come on the show and we just have real talk, just real talk about our lifestyles, points that we can take away, our failures, our mistakes, and the fun that we have being who we are and doing what we love every day. People want instant gratification in today's day and age. If you watch the kids these days and the way they eat ice cream. It's a funny analogy that I heard in an audiobook called Big Data, I think the book's called. I'll link that in my show notes below. The author says the way we ate ice cream back in the day was, we licked the sides of the ice cream, then we licked the top and slowly enjoyed the ice cream. But if you see kids eating ice cream now, they take the ice cream cone and just suck that whole their whole chunk of the ice cream right down their throats. And that is a very good depiction of the new generation of how we want things and we want instant gratification now. And I think podcast is the only surviving long style content consumable out there.
Yeah, well, I think surviving is probably the wrong word. I'd say flourishing. It's flourishing. Coming back into style.
Yeah,
because it's easy to do. You can hop on Skype with anyone, and the thought leaders of the world are wanting to do podcasts because they know that people consume it. Don't ask me why people are consuming long form content through podcasts. It's just happening. Like, the numbers are there to back it up.
Well, I think it's because. This is my personal view on it. I think long-form content through podcasts, it's personal. It sounds like, the two of us are talking to all our listeners directly.
Yes.
So that message and that impact resonates with our listeners so much more, and it leaves an impression, a deeper impression. And our listeners, I think, feel more engaged when listening to podcasts compared to audiobooks, which is really monotonous and machine-like, if I'm
Sure.
Yeah.
Especially when you're releasing content on a regular basis. I mean, when I started listening to podcasts probably about 4 years ago, before I started working on them, of course, I didn't even know what they were. I was listening to episodes, and I found it quite odd to think about it that another 100,000 people are listening to this episode just because it felt so personal to me.
Yep, that's true. I mean, the way I consume my podcast, I listen to a load of podcasts. I wake up at 4:30 in the morning. I drink 2 glasses of water. I was going to say 2 liters.
2 liters.
That's a lot of water in the morning. So 2 glasses of water. I put my shoes on, plug in my headphones, and listen to my podcast for an hour while I do my morning fasted cardio. And I think that keeps me entertained. I learn something. My mind is entertained. And I start my day off the right foot. So that's my way of consuming podcasts and feeding my mind with good content. On that note, what is your daily success routine that you do on a daily basis to ensure that you are reaching your day's goals, your milestones, and aligning yourself towards where you want to be in the next 5-10 years?
Sure. So my days don't look the same every day. That's definitely a routine of mine. They're not the same. Yep. Although there are a few things that follow through into every day, and these are tested over the last couple of years of me really trying to hustle and getting things done. Is every night before I go to bed, whether I'm going to bed at 10 p.m. or 2 a.m. in the morning. And that depends what day it is. I have a notebook. Sometimes I do it on Evernote, and I will write down the 4 main things that I want to accomplish tomorrow. And then overarching that, I have weekly goals, so bigger goals, and then quarterly goals, and then yearly goals. And ticking off that the following day it's just amazing. And I don't mean at the end of the day, when I'm still at my desk, I'll write down these notes. I have a notebook next to my bed.
I do too.
when I'm falling asleep, the ideas come and I write it down. Then when I wake up, I read them and I can implement them straight away.
Yes, we actually talked about this in one of our regular Skype calls about having a notebook with you at all times, because you never know when ideas pop in or pop into your head, and you're like, "Hey, man, that's a good idea." And then you wait till you get home, and then you forgot what the idea was or what the quote was that you thought of. So I think, here's another tip to all my listeners out there listening right now. Get a small notebook, keep it in your pocket, keep a pen, and jot down all the ideas and all the reflections that come into your head as you go through the day, the week, the month. I think that helps.
Like, I've not always done it, and I've just figured out that's what works for me.